What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another page of the playbook. This is Nate coming at you guys with another NFL offseason in the 32 NFL offseasons in 32-day series. Today, we are going to be talking about the Las Vegas Raiders. Before we get into today's video, guys, I just want to give a special shout out to today's sponsors, starting with Gold Fine and Bowles, lawyers for the injured. Personal injury, workers' compensation, those are their two things, but any sort of legal advice, they're the people to call. Give them a phone call, 309-673-5144. Tell them we sent you, okay? And I'd also like to shout out SeatGeek for sponsoring today's video as well. Use promo code PlaybookSports on their website to get $20 off your first purchase of $30 or more. Let's get back to the video. Raiders fans, let's talk about last year just a little bit. And again, I hate to be the one to say I told you so, but I told you so. I told you Josh McDaniels was not going to work as your head coach. And 4 games into the season, when they started out 1-3, he's kicked out the door. Now, fortunately enough, you had somebody already there to step in to become the interim head coach. More on him in just a bit. And he was able to sort of right the ship for you, but that's not what you want, right? You bring in Jimmy Garoppolo to play with these good wide receivers. You've got a solid wide receiving core. You've got a good rookie tight end in Michael Mayer. You've got a solid defense. You just drafted Tyree Wilson. You've got Max Crosby, who is becoming one of the best pass rushers in football. And you go, what, 9-8, 8-9? Just good enough to not get a great draft pick and not, you can't get one of the quarterbacks in the draft probably. And now you've played too well to where you're like, okay, we can't blow it up either. Like, the team is right there. The whole season was derailed, and it was just a disaster. So what have they done this offseason to remedy that, to make amends for what happened this past season, and to try to continue to chase down the Chiefs like every team in the AFC is doing? Let's talk about it. We're going to start first with the coaching changes, and I'll be the first to say I'm a little surprised the Raiders did the right thing here. Keeping Antonio Pierce and just getting rid of the interim title, making him your permanent head coach or the current actual head coach, I think that was a really smart move. He showed that the players loved him. He showed he knew what he was doing. He was more of a player's style coach. He's a player's first guy. And that is not what you're going to get when you're working with the Bill Belichick coaching tree. You look all over the place, and every time they leave somewhere, the players cannot help but talk about how much they hated them as a coach. McDaniel was hated in the Raiders locker room. Absolutely hated. So bringing in somebody that the players love, like Antonio Pierce, is a great pivot, and honestly kind of shocking for the Raiders to make that move. So I was really glad that they did that. Unfortunately, Pierce did bring in Luke Getsy to be the offensive coordinator, and I hate that move. Luke Getsy was awful in Chicago as the offensive coordinator. He has proven and shown in his tenure as offensive coordinator, at least in Chicago, that he doesn't care what his quarterback's good at. He's going to run his offense and not tailor it at all. If your quarterback that you have on roster cannot run his offense, they're going to look bad. It's not his fault because he's just running the offense. He can't be blamed for that. It makes no sense at all. You can see it with Fields all the time. They just refuse to let him use his legs. Like, no, you will be a pocket passer. Why? Let him do what he's good at. And eventually, maybe he'll develop into a pocket passer. But right now, his legs were the strongest thing, and Getsy was just so against it. And it drove me nuts, and I'm not even a Bears fan. So I do not like that move, but I love them signing Antonio Pierce and making him the actual full-time head coach. Let's talk about players leaving, players coming. We'll start with players leaving first. Running back Josh Jacobs, former first-round pick, has left and gone over to Green Bay. Got a big contract, 4 years, $48 million. I actually am okay with the Raiders letting him walk, and I'm sure Raiders fans are too, even though he was really good for them. You just don't want to pay a running back $12 million a year, especially when you don't have your quarterback situation figured out. And Josh Jacobs wasn't really carrying this team to greatness, as good as he may be. You've got to figure out other things, and you can't build a great team when you're paying a running back $12 million a year, in my opinion. So I'm okay with them letting him go. They also let defensive tackle Bilal Nichols walk in free agency, a solid defensive tackle, but not really a game changer by any means. And then they also let starting right tackle Jermaine Illuminor, hope I got that one right. They let him walk as well, and he was their starting right tackle. It wasn't the best, so they're going to have to replace him. Likely through the draft. I guess we'll see as we get into their free agent additions as well. Now let's talk about players that the Raiders brought in free agency, and we're going to start with one of my guys right here. Big Wilkins, baby. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of Christian Wilkins. I've said that. I have been stalwart in my support of Christian Wilkins and thinking he deserves every dollar he gets, right? 4 years, $110 million for him is well beyond the realm of what he should have gotten. I'm sorry. Again, huge fan, but if we had signed Christian Wilkins to 4 years, $27.5 million, I'd have been like, oh my God, that hamstrings you. That is a huge contract to give you. To give a defensive tackle who's had 1 year where he's had 10 sacks or more. I was like, at $23 million a year is where I thought he would sign, and I was like, ooh, I don't know if I'd want to give him $23 million a year, especially because we have someone else who can do the same job. But at the same time, Raiders needed to do something to spice things up. I would have taken this money and whatever other money you had and thrown it at a quarterback personally, but Christian Wilkins is a stud. He's a culture guy. Maybe that's what Antonio Pierce is going for. He's going for a guy to help kind of lead that culture, to shift it away from the Josh McDaniels and into his own sort of gear. If that's the case, I think he's the perfect person for that. Christian Wilkins is so fun to watch, so talented. That's just a ton of money for him. So love the player, not the contract. They also brought in quarterback Gardner Minshew, who will figure to, I guess, quote unquote, compete with second-year, fourth-round pick Aiden O'Connell for the starting quarterback position. It really won't be a competition. It should be Gardner Minshew from day one. They're paying him not starting quarterback money, but they paid him heftily enough to where it's like, yeah, this guy's got to kind of start for us. And also, the Raiders roster is too good to not have a quarterback that's at least competent playing. Like, this roster is solid. It is solid. So they also brought in him, and then I did like a couple of their low-key additions. I like bringing in Cody Whitehair from the Bears. No, he's nothing special, but he's a swing guard, can play all three of the interior offensive line positions. I like that, and I like them bringing in Andres Pete from New Orleans. I think he also can play several positions on the offensive line, gives them some versatility, and just some guys to sort of mix and match and find the best combination. I'm a huge fan of throwing as many darts at the offensive line wall as you have in your pocket. Bringing these guys in for cheap, I think, are great moves. Another kind of under the wire move that I like, under the radar move that they did was bringing in Michael Gallup for cheap. He's not a number 2 receiver, maybe not even a number 3 receiver, and on their depth chart, he's not listed at 3, he's listed at number 4. I think that's appropriate for him. Come in, maybe get a few snaps a game. He is athletic enough, right? He's nothing special. Dallas paid him instead of Amari Cooper, and that was a terrible decision then, and a terrible decision it has continued to be. But that being said, for $1.75 million to be a solid number 4 option, I'm a fan of that. I can't hate that at all. So I like what they brought in. I definitely think they brought in more than they lost. Letting a running back go who can be easily replaced, no offense to Josh Jacobs, not a big deal. Bilal Nichols walked. Okay, we brought in a guy who's 4 times the player in Christian Wilkins, and we paid him heavily. I still don't think they addressed the quarterback position adequately. I like Gardner Minshew as a backup quarterback who can come in and spot play for a little bit. If you're relying on him to play every single game, you did the wrong thing, and you should have thrown money at another quarterback. That's all I have on their free agency period. I think it's a net positive, more talent in than talent lost. Let's talk draft. As I watched the draft kind of unfold, I kept expecting to see the Raiders trade up with quarterbacks just flying off the board. I did not think we would see 6 quarterbacks in the first 12 picks, but that's what happened, and the Raiders just sat at 13 and watched as the last first-round grade quarterback, potentially, if you even like Bo Nix that much, which I don't, was taken. So I have question marks there. And again, I'll get into that as we get into the final offseason grade. However, Brock Bowers is a stud, an absolute stud. He was one of, I think, my 6th or 7th best player in the entire draft, and they sat at 13, didn't move, and got him. I question this one, though, again, too, because maybe they thought Denver wasn't going to take Nix, and they were doing like, okay, well, Bowers is the highest rated player on our board. Let's just bring him in. They just drafted Michael Mayer last year in the 2nd round, who was nearly considered a lock for the 1st round for a long period of time, eventually fell down the boards just a little bit, and they got him in the 2nd round. I thought it was a steal then. I loved that pick for them last year. And then they bring in Brock Bowers, who is a very good route runner. He does everything you want. He played a ton of slot at Georgia, so maybe they want to put him in the slot, but that's where Jacoby Myers will probably line up. They've got other guys who will line up in that slot wide receiver spot that you don't want it to be Brock Bowers because he's not going to be the shiftiest guy out there. So then you're putting him at tight end, and you just drafted a guy who you developed for a season. Maybe they're planning to run a lot of 12 personnel with 2 tight ends on the field, and if that's the case, you got a stud. You got 2 very good tight ends to grow with. I just don't know. They could have taken any of the defensive players that were available, and I would have been happy with that. Again, love Brock Bowers, the player. This is a good pick. This is an A-level pick, but you could have gotten any defensive player to help your defense as well. So I'm going to maybe be a little harsher in the grading for that just because of need, but Brock Bowers himself is an absolute monster. I will say I absolutely love their 2nd-round pick in Jackson Powers Johnson. I believe they took him at pick 44. Man, I wanted him to. I would have been happy with Miami taking him at 21, and you guys got him at pick 44. An absolute mauler in the run game, super physical, very good anchor and pass pro. Something like you'd think he's not the biggest guy on the field for sure, so you think these bigger defensive tackles will go right over him. He drops anchor, man. You cannot go through him. He is a very good blocker. And they have him right now listed at guard. You can play him at either guard position or center down the road, and he's set. He's going to be awesome. I truly believe in down the road here, we've got 2 centers taken in this class. Both of them are going to be top 5 centers in the NFL at some point in their career, in my opinion. So I absolutely love that pick of him. And I also think that they got really good value in the 4th round in cornerback Richardson out of Mississippi State. I don't even want to butcher the first name. DeCamerion Richardson. I'm going to roll with that one out of Mississippi State. Fantastic size for the position. 6'2". He's a rare athlete. 4.34 40-yard dash and a 35-inch vertical jump at 6'2". That's unbelievable. That can contend with any of the go up and get it type receivers. I like that. Yeah, he did not look great at Mississippi State, so you're betting on upside and coaching here. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt on that one just to see. Obviously, they took Tyree Wilson last year as kind of similar athletic freak, and as they have him listed as like DT3 right now, so I don't know what's going on with him. But I think that DeCamerion Richardson can be really solid in the 4th round. Getting somebody with corner 1 upside, in my opinion, I love that pick. So overall for this draft grade, yeah, maybe I would have liked a defensive player at pick number 13. But they got a top 7 player in the class, and they got him at number 13. That's fantastic value. And I love the Jackson Powers Johnson pick. I can't speak, and he feels like he's going to be a long-term Raider. Great pick there. I thought they got some solid value in the later rounds. I'm going to give this draft an A-. So solid draft. I like a lot of the picks that they made here. Overall, this offseason, I'm still not totally sure what the plan is here, Raiders. Like, you're too good to tank and get a top pick in the draft, right? We showed that last year in the middle of ineptitude. In the middle of a coaching change in midseason, you still finished 2nd place in the division. That's solid. So obviously your roster is good. It's a decently built roster. But you don't have a quarterback. You do not have a quarterback. I love Gardner Minshew. I've always liked Gardner Minshew. He's not a starting quarterback in the NFL. Everywhere he's gone, he has proven not to be a starting quarterback in the NFL. I've got so many questions there. So many questions on what the plan is, what they're going to do going forward. Like, they've got a ton of money locked up in stud players. Crosby's getting paid. Wilkins is getting paid. Devontae Adams is getting paid. They're paying a ton of money to these other positions, and they don't have an answer at quarterback. They don't even have a young guy to try and groom. If you're telling me the future's Aiden O'Connell, you're kidding yourself, Raiders fans. You're absolutely kidding yourself. So I need to see them figure it out. If they gotten a quarterback maybe in this draft, if they had traded up and gotten somebody, this could have been a slam dunk offseason. As it stands, I'm going to give them an A- for the offseason as well. Basically just A- across the board. An A- free agency period, draft, and overall offseason. I like what they're doing. Just figure out the quarterback position. Please, you won't go anywhere without a quarterback. I promise you. So, that's all I've got for you guys on today's NFL offseason for the Las Vegas Raiders. And I will see you guys in tomorrow's video where we talk about a 3rd straight AFC West team in the Los Angeles Chargers. We'll see you guys then. Before we get into today's video, guys, I just want to give a special shout out to today's sponsors, starting with Goldfine and Bowles, Lawyers for the Injured. Personal injury, workers' compensation, those are their 2 things, but any sort of legal advice, they're the people to call. Give them a phone call, 309-673-5144. Tell them we sent you, okay? And I'd also like to shout out SeatGeek for sponsoring today's video as well. Use promo code PlaybookSports on their website to get $20 off your first purchase of $30 or more. Let's get back to the video.